Hello and welcome to this ShipStation and ChannelAdvisor webinar. My name is Mike Hayes. I'm joined by Sean from ChannelAdvisor, and today we're going to give you 5 tips for expanding internationally. Just to let you know, the webinar is being recorded. There is also a question and chat function there, so feel free to put any questions in the box or comments throughout, and if it's urgent, we'll answer them immediately. If not, we'll wait till the end and answer any of your questions. But feel free to put anything down there throughout the chat. So as I said, my name is Mike. I'm the UK country manager here at ShipStation. We're a web-based application for managing orders and delivery. But a little bit more about that later. And I'm joined by Sean Feehan from ChannelAdvisor. Sean, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Mike. And yeah, I'm Sean, one of the account executives here at ChannelAdvisor, and we're essentially an e-commerce platform. And in my role, I help brands and retailers kind of navigate their online journey. And as Mike mentioned, we'll touch on that towards the end and throughout this presentation.
Good stuff. So today's agenda, we're going to kick off with the opportunity. We're going to look at why would a brand even consider shipping internationally, and going into a little bit of the background about what the opportunity really is with international shipping. We'll have a look at advertising and marketing, go into logistics and operations, currency and tax implications, and then we'll touch on areas that both ChannelAdvisor and ShipStation can really help power your brand to find new markets internationally. But I'll kick over to Sean to kick off to look into the opportunity.
Perfect. If you go on to the next slide, I suppose what I first wanted to do was set the scene a little with some stats from Google's mobility report, because online has always been there. But if you look at this report that was created by Google for authorities and businesses to better understand the changes and the adoptions that have taken place during lockdown, you can see across key geographies the impact it's had on retail and recreation, the areas that have probably been biggest hit by the pandemic and COVID. Some countries like Spain and Italy have seen over a 90% drop in this vertical alone. But I'm sure some of these percentages are changing now with the vaccine rollout, but now as we're seeing another rise with COVID, it's some countries, some people are kind of stuck in limbo at the moment, and it's created real shock to business systems and how their current model was working in operations. It's also created a massive shift in how people are shopping. Instead of going into physical stores, they're now looking online. And if you go on to the next slide, Mike, you can see from a report that was conducted last year, the rise in consumer spending online, and especially, I suppose, when you're looking at it, consumers are getting used to frictionless shopping, especially if you're staying at home and afraid maybe to go into certain retail outlets because of the spread of the virus, or perhaps you're getting used to the convenience that's coming with hassle-free shopping, getting your groceries delivered to your door, or Amazon next day deliveries, or just shopping from your favorite retail outlets. We're just seeing an increasing spend across all sectors online. And if you go on to the next slide again, I suppose since this situation has started, you could clearly see some phases take shape. The first had to do with people getting ready for COVID, then making sure their surroundings were adaptable to staying at home, or if they're working from the office, that they had the required kit or the safety environment. And in the US, our colleagues even saw a bump in sales as a result of the stimulus offered by the US government. But the next phase, we then saw a gradual reopening, and as we saw people get used to going outside and testing some of the physical outlets, and even with the pandemic, the the landscape would have changed anyway if we didn't have COVID, but this has just been accelerated by COVID and the kind of lockdown that we've all experienced. And we've just had Prime Day, and considering that Amazon has moved this event from October of last year to the less seasonally active June that we just had, we thought it might be difficult to compare growth from last year to this year. But from what we've seen and what we've recorded, virtually all of our leading channels showed GMV growth compared to last October's Prime Day, with some channels up modestly and others up well over 100%. So it's there's a massive opportunity out there across all categories. And if you go into the next slide again, I just wanted to call out one particular example that we have here at ChannelAdvisor. One of the marketplaces we connect to is Zalando, which is Europe's biggest fashion marketplace. And right on the bottom left, you'll see what ChannelAdvisor's customers' aggregated GMV was for January of 2019, and across the key countries that GMV was coming from. So Germany been a big part of that. And if you go forward again one more, you can see how that's exponentially grown and across into new geographies, but the GMV has really just grown up. And again, from this year, it's been a massive rise again. It's only continuing to grow as people get used to shopping online and getting used to the availability of cross-border e-commerce. And if you go one step further, obviously the last slide kind of looked at GMV in aggregate, but if I wanted to call out just one particular example, is one customer that ChannelAdvisor started working with late last year in De Facto, a Turkish brand, who are kind of brand new to e-commerce, and this shows the potential that's out there for a relatively big brand that had 300 to 500 stores, and then within the space of I think 6 weeks they were already present in 4 new countries, and that's continuously grown across more locations, with Zalando as one example. And if we move forward again, so now we've kind of looked at the opportunity and seen what's out there. The next one is really looking at advertising and marketing and making sure that your brand is visible and people are aware of you in the space. So if you go forward, there's some key things to consider for any brand in going to new marketplaces, to new countries. As you may have honed your home market or your own website, it's important if you're branching, let's say from the UK to the French market or to the Benelux market, that you understand the competitive landscape there, if there's similar products to you, or if there really is a market there and that people are searching for your products, and how do you differentiate from them. And there's many ways to do that, and one of them can be just simply scanning the likes of an Amazon or a Bol.com, and another one could be looking at Google Trends just to understand what people are shopping for. And if you move forward again, Mike. So here I just wanted to call out, I suppose, how brands today are leveraging advertising on Amazon. Amazon being one of the biggest marketplaces globally. You can see, I suppose, the 2 key statistics. 70% of Amazon customers never click past the first page, just to show the importance of being present on that page and ensuring that you're ranking accordingly. And then 64%, of those clicks go to the first 3 items displayed. And highlighted in yellow on that mobile device and on that laptop are all sponsored brands and sponsored products, which is essentially advertisements by the brands in question. If you go forward again, just to highlight that, just from a generic search, you can see these sofas displaying up here from Amazon. And one more click forward, Mike, and everything that you're seeing on that page is essentially an advertisement, which Amazon would call either a sponsored brand or a sponsored product. So even if you're not aware of it, this is what's happening in the space, and that just kind of highlights the prevalence and the importance of utilizing advertising in your go-to-market strategy. But if you go forward one more, obviously the last two examples were calling out Amazon, but of course there's Google and Facebook, and you can see just from their revenues alone just how much bigger they are in comparison to Amazon. But moving forward one more, you can see just that the growth rate that Amazon is quickly getting ahead of Google and Facebook, but it's really becoming more and more apparent as more brands, retailers are putting their products on Amazon, and people are adopting the marketplaces, and advertising is really growing on that platform faster than ever before. And then finally, I suppose one of the biggest hurdles we see brands and retailers face today is keeping everything in check across their online activities. So they may have a great website, they may be present on marketplaces and pushing brand awareness across digital marketing channels. However, one of the most important facets to consider is located in the middle of that image on the right, which is fulfillment. When a consumer buys, are you able to deliver within the marketplace's SLAs, or can you meet the expectations of a consumer? So, for instance, if I'm shopping today, I kind of expect it next day or within 2 days, which kind of leads nicely into Mike's part in looking at logistics and operations, so making sure that you've honed that for the markets or the areas that you're selling into.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate that. And as you said, absolutely leads into my section. I think what Sean's done there is really painted a picture about the opportunity and the growth areas, in particular on marketplaces internationally, and that's great. I think it's probably not a huge surprise to merchants to hear international is a great place to go. Sometimes what can be a huge opportunity obviously increases complexity in the back of someone's business, which is really where it's my tips come from. It's how can we help streamline some of that complexity and make the idea of shipping a product internationally a little less intimidating. So the first tip we've got is don't be afraid to change your shipping strategy. So that comes into selection of carrier or type of service. You may have to offer different delivery times and prices to customer as usual, and that's pretty clear, right? If you're shipping something domestically or down the street using a preferred carrier, don't be afraid to have a look, shop around, look for the best rates. Lots of carriers have specialisms in different lanes to different geos, different parts of the world are more effective to ship with different couriers, and I absolutely would recommend you implementing potentially a multi-carrier strategy for that, and speaking to as many as possible to allow you to get a good handle on what those costs are going to be, because shipping internationally, the cost is going to be exponentially higher than a domestic shipment. Second one is look for ways to save on space on packaging. If you're shipping something a lot further away and it is dimensionally a lot bigger, then you're going to pay for that. You don't want to pay for your product to be shipping thin air. That's not a great option for your customer, yourselves, or the environment or the carrier. So it's a lose for everyone unless you can package in the most efficient and effective way possible. Check sizes and weight restrictions. So make sure you're using standard sizes for your envelopes and boxes. If your mail item can't fit through automated processing equipment, it may be considered non-machinable and cost more to send. We see this actually a lot on our platform with customers shipping what the carriers call ugly items. It might be a new retailer, and they're packaging something, I don't know, in plastic bags and kind of tying it together with string or whatever. And when it get, the carrier calls me up all the time is DPD. They put that product through the DPD sorting machine. It either jams it or it falls off. It can't fit through. They have to manually take it out, reset it, and it's a huge hassle. Ultimately, the carrier is going to stop taking your product if it's annoying to carry and it's costing them money. They can just cut up your account. So you really got to have to think about that as a retailer. And then the final one is keep communication open. So if you're shipping, cross-border, cross-continent, it's going to take a lot longer for that item to get there. But that doesn't mean that the item is any less important to the end retailer. Like yourselves, if ever I buy something that is really exciting online, if it's tech or fashion, I'm literally counting down the days for that item to arrive. But if it's being shipped from the US, I know it's going to take a couple of weeks maybe to arrive. But if anything, I'm more excited about that item coming, and I'm more grateful for a retailer keeping me informed of where that item is. Can that be through tracking updates, or if the item hasn't been shipped yet, or if there's a delay, anything like that? End consumer is desperate to know where that item is. If they've bothered to engage with your product and rather than buy it domestically, there's probably a good reason why they've done that. And for you, keeping that customer informed and engaged in your brand should be as important, if not more important, than a domestic customer, just because you've probably had to work harder to convince them to purchase your product. So second one, sometimes a little less exciting, but a lot more confusing, is customs. Something that puts a lot of retailers off shipping internationally, and which has really closed off Europe for a lot of our merchants, because they found before they come to us is they found that shipping into Europe is so horrendously confusing that they just don't want to do it, or the carrier they were working with has dropped the ball on them too many times, and it's just not cost effective for them to do it anymore. So ideally, if you can get your customs and all these details locked down, then you face you're ahead of the game, ahead of the competition on this. So the first one is HS codes. HS codes, so harmonized code or commodity codes, it's essentially a description coding system for every item that you could possibly send. So it's a 6 to 10 digit number required for all international shipments. You need to make sure all of these are correct. It's going to ensure that your product gets through the international borders as quickly and efficiently and more streamlined as possible. Second one is ensure each parcel has the associated forms. Sometimes you kind of need to check with each carrier as to what forms and documentation they require and how they need to receive that information. But every border is going to need to see some forms or some documentation about what that product is. The HS code needs to be on the second one is the declared value and the certificate or the country of origin. All of these vitally important pieces that, especially for retailers in the UK shipping into Europe, have never really had to think about before. Now it's vitally important that that is accurate and not just present, but absolutely accurate. For example, if all of the components are from outside of UK, but it has been manufactured in the UK, you need to work out whether that makes it the country of origin a UK product or from outside where the components are from. So it's vitally important that you get some expert knowledge to give you an up-to-date, informed detail about all of this. So the next piece is internationalizing your operations. Okay, so you need to firstly make sure your business is compliant. So checking with regulatory agencies that you are able to operate in that country, following all guidelines, and I would probably recommend hiring an attorney or a lawyer to give you those details. And the final one is potentially opening up a local bank account. There are a variety of companies out there, for example, World First, who can help open up local bank accounts for you to transact locally. If you're buying and selling in that country, you reduce forex fees. So it's well worth taking a look at. The second one is language barriers. So translating everything into local language, especially for I think people who speak English, we're sometimes guilty of assuming that English carries throughout every language, which is, or at least across Europe, which is it can be true, but if anything, it just creates a barrier for your potential consumers interacting with your product, and it opens up the opportunity for them to ask questions and feel like they're getting a local experience for the product that you're looking to sell. We see this, we have a customer, Rock helmets, really cool helmets. They look a bit like Star Troopers. They're loved globally. I follow their their Instagram, and they make a good job, or do a great job of translating that message into Japanese, into Korean, because regardless of the design of the helmet, it's a design that carries internationally, and those consumers want to interact with that product in their local language. And that kind of feeds into the next one. It's understanding how to engage your target audience. So consider the cultural. Just because something works domestically, you can't assume it's going to work all over the globe. And that's it might be the models that you choose to use in that country, for example, or using just particular visuals that resonate with that culture and its various nuances. So worth exploring maybe how other brands have done it. What's a successful transcontinental brand? How do they, Nike, for example, how do they communicate in that local country with the same type of shoe that they sell, in different continents? They might have different imagery or different language or different music or whatever it is. It's worth exploring that. And then the final piece is, potentially building those relationships in the new countries. If you can, potentially even visiting them, visiting your biggest market, working out where that is, feeling the culture, understanding the people. There's particular nuances that you pick up in a local country that you really can't obviously get from the internet or just speaking to people over Zoom calls, for example. Easier said than done these days, but there's high potential for opening up, and I think there's changes for travel outside of the UK in particular for commercial reasons. So well worth. I'm sure we're all desperate to travel regardless, but from a business perspective, absolutely worthwhile doing. Cool. So next one is internal processes. So operating at scale across border. So internal processes, this is where it gets interesting. Lots of businesses make a huge effort to ensure that their product looks brilliant at the checkout, in their web store, on their marketplace. They've built their business to look incredible. Their product looks amazing. The pricing's all on point. They've made it easy to purchase. But what happens in the back of their business does not match the beauty of the front of their business. And this is where it's well worth ensuring that you are investing in internal processes to ensure that all of the hard work that's gone into convincing your customer to purchase that product doesn't get completely destroyed by rubbish process in the back end, which ruins the experience of the consumer. So you need to work out what's going to be needed for that international shipment, for example. Do we need to package it correctly? Who's the carrier? When are they going to pick it up? What's the tracking details going to be looking like? How are we going to communicate that with our customer? Second one is obviously stock synchronization across multiple platforms. Vital, obviously, to ensure you don't sell out. Especially if you're having SKUs, for example, where there's across multiple platforms with different language descriptions. And then the final piece, shipping efficiency. So selecting, if you are operating a multi-carrier strategy for international versus domestic, for example, if there is multiple carriers that are shipping your product, for example, jewelry manufacturers, if they have particular items of jewelry or handbags, for example, that are hugely expensive, they might want to send the very, very expensive items with a different courier to the, maybe the smaller items or replacements or smaller components that they might send out. Purely from a reliability perspective and insurance, that might warrant having maybe a more express carrier with a closed network where that item is never going to leave that carrier's network, to ensure that nothing goes wrong with that parcel and all of the tracking events are saved within that carrier's network. That obviously comes with cost, because of that carrier can't rely on economies of local economies when they are developing their network, but it could be worth it for the higher value items. And then it's the next piece, which is automating the selection of that carrier and that particular service to ensure that all of that thought and effort going into selection of the carrier doesn't start to slow your business down, because you're spending so much time making the decision about, or panicking about, what's the right carrier, what's the right route to get it there effectively, quickly. You can just have technology automate all of that piece. So the next one, currency and tax implications. Obviously, we touched on this earlier on, but for the first off is currency. So for consumers, obviously they want to pay in local currency, but they also have the particular payment types that are most popular in that country. Again, you can be victim to thinking that MasterCard or Visa or PayPal or Klarna is the most popular, or in your country. That might not be the case, and you need to do a little bit of research to find out, because it's painfully obvious. You want to make it as easy as possible for someone to give you money. How frustrating is it when you're trying to buy something and you're desperately trying to give them all your details, and that website does not want to take your money? It's just it's crushing. It's like, please just take my money. I'm desperate to transact with you. And sometimes, if it's an international setup, whoever was setting that up in a faraway country has not understood what's needed for the local buyer or the kind of international buyer to give them money. Providing prices in local currency, obviously we just touched on that. Try to mitigate currency risk if operating in a new country. So this is when revenues are impacted by foreign exchange rate fluctuations. So invoice and contract in local currency. This is the easiest strategy to invoice and contract only in US dollars, keeping expenses and revenues in the same currency. Use a local bank to match invoice and payment currencies. Again, I'd recommend World First. They do a fantastic job here. And then the final piece is hedge exchange rates. So banks and forex providers can help you here to see off any potential waves and lock in a rate that is right for your business and not going to expose you to a huge potential currency fluctuations in a market that you don't necessarily fully understand. Okay. And then the final piece on this is tax implications. So anyone who's ever watched a presentation by Avalara will know that tax rates vary by country and product, and they can be incredibly confusing. For those in e-commerce shipping parcels internationally, I think the two from a duties perspective that's worth knowing inside out are delivery duties paid, or DDP, and delivered at place, or DAP, often known as delivery duties unpaid. Essentially, the delineation is who's paying the duties. I think we've all been stung by, you buy something online and then the cost of actually paying the duties is sometimes the same as the cost of that item, and you were never informed. I actually had this with a band I know out of the US. I was really excited. I purchased some merchandise from that brand. I wasn't able to pick it up until I paid £25 of duties. I forgave it. You kind of forgive it as a consumer when it's an independent band and they probably weren't aware of some of these international duties. But as you start to be a more established brand, customers are not going to stand for that level of experience, and really the duties. I think most consumers expect the duties to have been paid by the exporter rather than the importer. I know that some marketplaces are mandating DDP, but I think it's well worth just reviewing the commercial terms for each one of your items, and ensuring that you are compliant with each marketplace that you or channel that you actually sell on. So lots to think about there. Big opportunity, lots of complexity, but don't let that complexity put you off. There is a huge market out there. especially now the international market has got a little bit more difficult to transact, particularly from the UK. And this is kind of where we come in to help. We have a lot of expertise and a lot of customers and knowledge in this area. And because of the level of complexity, we've invested heavily to reduce that for our retailers. So from a ShipStation perspective, a little bit of detail about ShipStation. So as I said, web-based application for managing orders and delivery. So we integrate into channels where orders might live, such as ChannelAdvisor or marketplaces directly, as well as carriers. So you can automatically print a shipping label with multiple carriers, which is a huge help for retailers of all shapes and sizes. For those who are international retailers or shipping internationally, as I said, there's that level of complexity. The complexity comes in generating an international label with a carrier, such as maybe FedEx or DHL. That's first level of complexity that we solve. But then it goes a little bit deeper, and then there's that internationalized or international documentation, which is a massive headache for anyone who's looking at that really exciting international market. So automation of customs declarations, really, really useful. So rather than having someone within the business manually double checking commodity codes, country of origin, declared value, all of these details, making sure that that's correct, we can automate that in seconds so that all of these details are ready within that order. The platform recognizes the items and generates the commercial invoice or sends that electronically if that's an option with that carrier, so that you never have to print anything off. There's no more printing it off, putting it in the little cellophane bag on the box, and hoping that that doesn't get damaged on the way, hoping that the right person at customs pulls out the document, puts it back, etc. It actually looks quite ugly on the box sometimes as well. If that can be communicated electronically, then you're covered as a retailer, and it's a far better experience. So we do this, and then we're also communicating commodity or tax identifiers now to the carriers. So EORI numbers, IOSS numbers. There's been a lot of change in this field. We've had to keep our ear to the ground about what's happening with Brexit and other internationalization changes, and ensure that our product is ready for retailers who are expecting to continue to be able to ship to their international customers. So we're investing heavily in this area to ensure that we are up to date, compliant, so that our customers can ensure that the technology is up to date with the law, basically. But this is what ShipStation is ready to do. Our aim is to democratize access to efficient enterprise-grade technology for a very affordable fee. We're a global business. We think globally first. We've got offices in the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, UK, France, and we're growing every day. So if you're interested, feel free to give me a shout or contact one of the sales guys. We do offer a 30-day free trial, and we also work very closely with ChannelAdvisor. So I'll pass back to Sean to talk about how they can help you as well with your international journey.
Cheers, Mike. Yeah, so ChannelAdvisor, for those of you that aren't aware, brands and retailers can use ChannelAdvisor's e-commerce platform, and on the right-hand side you'll see various different color blocks. Essentially, it's a modular platform, and you can pick and choose the parts that are most relevant to your business at this particular moment in time. But each individual module basically opens up a world of opportunity for your business. So starting from the top, we can connect you to the various digital marketing channels like Facebook, Amazon Advertising, Google, or the affiliate networks like Criteo. So within ChannelAdvisor, you're holding basically one centralized source of truth of your product data. And one of the things that Mike mentioned going through his presentation was that there's a lot of complexity to consider for a lot of these channels or locations that you go to, and keeping on top of the rate of change within e-commerce and the requirements that are expected by all these individual channels, such as Amazon, eBay, a Zalando, or maybe a Target or Walmart. ChannelAdvisor connects you to today over 100 different channels, and by the end of this year, I think we're adding 80 new ones, where we connect you to those channels and automatically map your product data to those channels. So you don't have to worry about the compliance or making sure that you're up to date with these changes that these marketplaces are making, ensuring that you've got time to focus on your core business. And we take care of the connection to these various channels, ensuring that you can increase your sales. Another aspect that we cover is a piece called Brands Analytics, where we can measure your brand's performance across any e-tailer site online today in terms of the availability of your products, the price that they're selling at, if they're in and out of stock, any ratings and reviews that those products have on particular channels, because we know that anything below a 4-star rating can severely impact sellout. So there's really a variety of different products and tools available to you through this platform. And it's, or I suppose our core purpose is to make selling online as easy as possible for any big and small brands today. And we're here really to provide an avenue of growth through the channels that we have. And you'll see on the bottom right hand side, there's that one area that's linked into fulfillment. So if you're not using the likes of Amazon FBA or Zalando, we do have our partners such as ShipStation here to open up those avenues and make that logistical nightmare that bit easier and smoother for you. If I hand it back to you.
Thanks, Sean. So there's a couple of questions in the chat here. As I said at the beginning of the webinar, if you have any more, feel free to pop them in. The first question I have is from one of the attendees. It said, we want to know more about shipping our product internationally within 72 hours of shipping, as our product is perishable and we have successfully shipped several international companies, but some never make it. Really good question. I guess when perishable goods is a real tough one. I think there's two parts to this. First one is the carrier selection, speaking to as many carriers as possible. We sit in between, obviously, selling channels and carriers, so we have lots of links in. So feel free to reach out if you want more introductions. But it's the first piece is getting that carrier right, understanding where the product's been, how long it sits in certain warehouses, is it going by air or road, how quickly is it going to get there, and can all of that cost, can you factor that into your margin, or do you send that cost to your customer to enable them to receive it? The second piece is obviously packaging that product, that perishable product up, and looking into the best way to protect it. Keep it cool, keep it in ambient temp with the right temperature to ensure that when the customer gets it, it hasn't perished, basically. The second question I can see is there a place we can see the requirements of each company? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by the requirements of each company. I would assume that that's either you mean the carrier or the country. The requirements of the carrier, we can help with that and provide, as I said, introductions to the right people, or provide documentation around that. The next one, it looks like it's for you, Sean, and it's about what is the best marketplace to grow a brand, for a brand to take a look at to grow internationally?
It really depends on what category you're selling in and where you're currently based. So, for instance, if you're in consumer electronics, there's really no getting away from the likes of an Amazon or a Bull.com in the Benelux region. But we have growing marketplaces such as Backmarket, which is really fueling the circular economy, where they're looking at refurbished goods, and not only just brand new. But if you're in fashion, there's really the biggest one out there is Zalando, but then there's many other options like About You, or maybe H&M's own marketplace called Found in the Nordics. But again, it really depends on what you're selling and what your go-to-market is, and I suppose what your budget and appetite is for growth as well, because you can't select, not all channels will be relevant depending on what the commercials and the commissions that they charge. So it's important that you kind of unpick those before deciding which ones to go with, based off the opportunity size as well.
That's great. I've had a clarification that this the initial question was around country, not company, and that's, yeah. I would recommend speaking to our partner Avalara about the requirements from a tax and customs perspective for each country. They will be able to help you definitely on that. You know, we do have a fair bit of expertise, but I think for the nature of this question, I would recommend Avalara. That looks like it's everything from us. I don't know if Sean, you had anything else that you wanted to add?
No, I think I mean, one of your big points rang true to me about the who should pay for the import or tax or duty, and I definitely think it should be an exporter, because I've been stung with that a couple of times before. But no questions from my side. I suppose if you want to find more about ChannelAdvisor, you can log on to our website, or you can look me up on LinkedIn, and happy to speak to anyone who's got questions.
Great. Okay, well, thank you everyone for your time. As I said, this webinar is being recorded, so you will be able to listen back. But if there are any points that you want further clarification on, feel free to contact myself or Sean, via LinkedIn, or head over to our website, and you'll get contact details there. But thank you everyone. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us.